Everyone, welcome to another edition of Founder Wisdom Podcast. Today we have Anthony Domine with us. He is CEO and founder of Pathmaker Brands. Anthony, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about Pathmaker?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Charles. As you said, founder of Pathmaker Brands, started it a year ago, largely just based off of my passion for marketing and branding and the strategy around that, and really what that does for organizations, the clarity that comes from knowing your brand. And I became a story brand certified guide several years ago, and ever since I found that amount of clarity and how to help people define those messages, get clear, and then pull that forward into marketing strategy, I've just always been looking for excuses to serve people with that. So that's why I started Pathmaker.
Yeah, pretty cool. And serve is the keyword here. Your background, I mean, you've been an executive pastor, you've been chief of staff also, which is pretty cool. Tell us a bit more about that experience.
Yeah, so I grew up in church. It's always been an integral part of my life. The earliest memory I have of church with my parents was we were at a setup tear down church at a community center, and I remember setting up and tearing down chairs. Right, so serving at church has always been a part of my life. And yeah, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, my wife and I felt led to serve at this church. And it evolved into the role of executive pastor and leading people. We had about 25 people on staff, over 2,000 people going to the church on the weekend, which was a wild experience. There's a very unique kind of leadership and experiential challenge that you're solving when you're leading paid staff, unpaid volunteers, while also trying to serve the people that call it their home.
Yeah.
And also a lot of opportunity when it comes to leadership development and how you help people grow in their skill sets and connecting all those things together. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot about hard conversations. I learned a lot about conflict. I learned a lot about clarity and role definition and expectations through that season, as well as continuing to stay focused on, as you said, what's critical about serving people and staying focused on that, even when organizationally it gets confusing.
Yeah, and I guess this type of business very much led by Christian values, and I can try to picture the environment and the setting. It must be nicer than a business. Is it like better flowing, or is there more conflicts as well? Like, tell me a bit more about the business, because I don't know the day-to-day about running a church.
Yeah, no, and most people don't. I was talking with somebody not too long ago about the stress and the challenge of being a leader in a church, and I was just telling them, I was like, most people are never going to fully understand, because they're going to assume, what do you do during the week? Don't you just make a church trip and have it on Sunday? Seems like an easy job. I would say one of the things that makes it uniquely challenging is that it's a good and a bad thing, that everything in your life is in one bucket.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest challenges of being an organizational leader at a church is that your whole life is now framed by this one thing, this one mission.
Okay.
So that makes it really hard to have boundaries.
Hmm.
And I don't even just mean physical boundaries when it comes to, I'm at the church this day, now that's part of it. The hardest thing is the emotional and mental boundaries, because you're just thinking about it all the time. And because the mission that you're on is so good, it's you're adding such value. So it's sort of impossible not to obsessively think about it. And it makes it really hard to stay healthy mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and even physically. Yeah. And then the other challenge is, you're working with volunteers, and leading volunteers is a real unique kind of challenge.
Okay, is it a paid role, chief of staff?
Yeah, well, I mean, big is relative, I suppose. It certainly was the biggest role I've ever had, leading that amount of paid staff and hundreds of volunteers and stuff. But there are definitely bigger roles. Peter Drucker
I meant
did
paid.
say,
was it paid like?
my role paid?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I was always paid.
Okay, and yeah, managing volunteers, well, I think the motivation is there from these individuals, but also there's some limits, right? Because they need to get money in their life and pay their expenses. So I guess it's kind of limited, but would you say that it's a higher quality of human now that you're managing non-volunteers, and it's a different type of business? It's a marketing business. What was the difference in the difference between both organization and the quality of employees?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say my time leading in church has made me a significantly better leader,
Okay.
because when you're leading volunteers, you are forced to learn the skills that are driven by empathy empowered leadership, meaning, what does this experience look like for a volunteer? Or do they love their work? Do they not? Which largely determines whether or not they stay engaged. So then bringing that into a paid space is not entirely unique. There are organizations that think this way, but many don't. And it does limit the type of experience from a business perspective you can provide for the quality of their life. But I've definitely brought that into my career post church world. And I am still obsessively focused on my work environment being a great place to work, holding people to high expectations, but clarifying my standards and trying to serve them in their experience and working with us at Pathmaker. So it does change your worldview and how you serve the people that you lead. Because if you spend all of your time in the business space, you have very tangible carrots and sticks.
Yeah.
And those are way easier to use to motivate people, but they're not sustainable ways, and they're not healthy ways to motivate people, as opposed to inspiring people towards a mission, inspiring them to higher standards, calling them to a bigger and grander mission than themselves. Those are things that make it a great place to work, or that's what I'm trying to do.
Wow. Yeah, very cool experience indeed. And that led you to chief of staff at Vive and Boost Media. And as you told me, the experience there was more or less interesting, but you learned interesting lesson there, right?
Yeah, so I actually launched Pathmaker as I was leaving my church job, and then I got connected with someone else who runs a similar business in the church space.
Yeah.
And long story short, we decided to kind of merge our businesses together. I moved my clients over so we could build these two companies in concert. One was a business focus, one was a church focus. Now, he had already had the church business thriving, and I was planning, hey, let's build this two doors to the same house, essentially. And yeah, became the chief of staff, working closely with him on it. And yeah, I don't want to say anything disparaging, but essentially there was a lot of issues with paying staff, myself included, and a lack of transparency in the running of the business.
What did you learn from that?
I would say the two biggest things I learned. The first is learning how to trust your gut and taking action on it.
Wow, that's a powerful one. Yeah, I've got that lesson too many times over in the past couple of years. You know, when the gut tells you no, listen to your system and just, you know, don't do it. But in some situation, I found that, you know, that kind of fear, I wanted to take it head on, and I needed to do the thing, although my gut would tell me like, no, I want to put the fear down at all costs, basically. And yeah, although the experience is not always pleasant, then I can still say afterwards I've relinquished my fear. I got the victory over my fear. What is the equilibrium between following your gut and facing your fears?
Wow, powerful question. Well, you know, when I think about gut, Malcolm Gladwell has a book called Blink, which is an amazing book that sort of just explains this thesis that your blink, your quick, fast reactions is actually your body and brain doing a lot of difficult math, you know, a lot of bringing in all these variables and making decisions. And a lot of times people don't trust their blink assessments because they assume because they're fast, they're worse. But they're actually not worse. They're actually really apt. You have learned survival mechanisms and all this kind of stuff. So I think a big part of that is better understanding your gut. And your gut is not always right either. And maybe you had a bad taco and you're feeling a little goofy, you know, and you just need to deal with your bowels. But you know, kind of testing your gut, experimenting, understanding with what it feels like in different ways. And fear is a part of your gut reaction to things. And then I think within that too, there's healthy fear and then there's unhealthy fear. Healthy fear is telling you this is a red flag, right? And then there's unhealthy fear, which is anxiety in essence, right? You're trying to predict the future. You know you ought to do something, and you're so afraid to do it that you don't do it. And I think it really then comes down to, is this healthy or unhealthy fear? And then going to the why of that, the core of that, which very well could be, I know I should do this, but I'm afraid. Then it's like, hey, you got to just stick it out. Which a lot of founders and myself included. Oh my gosh, I've had a lot of dark moments in this past year.
Yeah.
Or you get to that core and you go, no, this is a fear that's telling me I ought not to do this, and to trust that, and to actually be brave enough, courageous enough to have the hard conversation, take that action, quit the job, fire the employee, change the business model, whatever things you need to do that your gut's telling you to do when you know you ought to do it.
Sure. Yeah, the equilibrium question is always a tricky one because it ought to be answered in kind of percentages and in specific situations. For example, I have another upcoming Ironman, and yeah, sometimes I get stressed about it. So yeah, my gut tries to protect me from that awful 16-hour day, just hustling and trying to get to the finish line. But it's always worthwhile, I think. And in any bad experiences, as long as they don't last too long, and take too much of your time, money, and energy, you can learn like specific lessons out of them, and you can think some more. But indeed, like what I got from listening to you is that the gut is, and like you said, the algorithm is like incredible, all the math that goes on, and the body knows that it's kind of paired with the brain with your past experiences, and man, there's so much wisdom in there. So yeah, but that experience led you to Pathmaker Brands, which has a very cool website, like I told you. And how's that doing nowadays? Who do you target? How's that business going, and where do you see it going the next couple of years?
Well, because I know a lot of people that you're talking to on your podcast here, or all of them, you're talking to and listening to are founders, entrepreneurs, and kind of on this journey. I think everyone listening will understand it's a mixed bag. I told someone, if you choose to become an entrepreneur, you need to be comfortable not sleeping, because you're either not sleeping because you're too excited, or you're not sleeping because you're too scared. So either way, you're not sleeping. And so I would say that's where we're at with Pathmaker. It's still a baby company. It's in its infancy. If you're familiar with the startup J curve, talks about several phases of the startup life. I think we're very much in the morph stage, where we're kind of evolving our product and trying to figure it out, and not trying to be too prescriptive on what it is. And ultimately, I think the biggest challenge that we have with Pathmaker right now is, I know our flywheel, which is the Jim Collins concept of how you get an organization to move, that there's this natural progression of how things feed itself. Our natural flywheel is going to be delivering great work for our clients. And because our work is so public, it's going to then naturally progress into more clients, because people will then ask, hey, who does your stuff, right? That flywheel, though, takes a long time. And I have been surprised with how long our sales cycle is. I thought with our price points being as competitive as they are, that our sales cycle would be faster. People would be willing to just go, yep, let's do it. Let's start tomorrow. But our sales cycle takes 2 or 3 months. So yeah, I mean, we're in a season right now, I'd say, where our margins are thin. Our business model is developing, but it's secure. We're delivering good value, but it's not as good as I want it to be. But we're on the path. So it's an exercise in aggressive patience of being intentional each and every day, making it 1% better, but also being patient and knowing that it's going to take time for us to really develop the machine that we want.
Yeah, for sure. I can relate to lots of what you were saying. And yeah, 2 to 3 months sales cycle, that seems to fit with your price point here. Typically, who are you targeting? Who's your target?
Well, I think that's part of the challenge, right? We're so young that I don't really know. We're experimenting with lots of different targets. I'd say the broadest definition of our target is between companies that are 10 to 200 in size,
Okay.
that are 2 to 10 million in revenue, and it's a CEO or a CMO or surrounding titles that feel the weight and responsibility of driving their marketing machine, but they can't do it alone.
Got it.
And our business model is designed to kind of help them run that machine, keep things delivering month over month, and our one of our goals is to really give business leaders visibility into that machine when a lot
Yeah,
of times it feels like a black box. So
sure.
it's really anybody who feels like they're just kind of overwhelmed with keeping the trains running on time when it comes to their marketing.
Yeah, you mentioned that your work is very much public, and I'm all in with the open source movement slash philosophy slash mindset. How do you go with like testimonials and case studies? Do you have your client sign a contract saying that, hey, if we're successful, you will allow me to use that material? How does it go?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, we have a line item in our contract that essentially says both the client and Pathmaker brands own, the creative to be used. And I even specify in our most recent iteration of our contract, which I sent out just this week for the first time, that I just say specifically, Pathmaker Brands has the right to leverage the work produced in marketing. Because I've had a lot of questions, clients come back and say, well, how are you going to use it? And they rightly are trying to understand the assumption that I'm making or that they're making on, am I going to use it for another client? Am I going to,
Mhm,
whatever, reproduce their work or
mhm.
whatever? But I've just started to say, hey, you own this 100%, but Pathmaker reserves the right to use this work for marketing.
Got it. I'm seeing your packages here, which are quite interesting. How do you go with the unlimited graphic design, unlimited video editing? I call it all you can eat. So to me, that business model is, I mean, when it gets profitable is like when a client gives you less work, kind of, and they're like just too busy with other things, and then like you have less work, and as a result, you can get more money. Why did you, and I mean, on the other side of the equation, if I'm an all you can eater type of client, I can order a bunch of work from you and probably profit on my side from giving you so much work, although I'm pretty sure you have in your contract some limits. Why did you choose this business model? And then I'll have another follow-up question after that.
Yeah, so I chose it because I don't want my clients worrying about how many graphics they've asked for when you're talking about driving the overall marketing machine. And there's so much you're trying to keep up with. You go, "Ah, did I ask for 3 yet or 7?" And I can't
Yeah.
remember. And I've been that client before, and it's so
Mhm.
distracting. And you're so afraid of those hidden fees, right? It's like get an invoice back and it's triple or whatever I thought it was going to be. That's a painful moment as a business leader, and I want to save them from that pain. Now, how do you do the business model? I'm largely figuring that out right now. My hypothesis and what's proven so far with our small client base is a few things. One, we're not promising a certain turnaround time.
Okay.
So the balance between turnaround time and unlimited, that's where I think it kind of gets impossible to deliver that in value. Because then there are two things that happen. One, your expectation is sort of impossible to manage. But the worst thing that happens in my mind is I create a culture for my creative talent that sucks.
Mhm.
Because now they're my creative graphic designer on my team that's assigned to some account. They get a request that comes in at 3:30 p.m. They have plans to have dinner with their friends that night, but now they know they only have 24 hours to deliver a graphic, and they asked for a booklet, or something like, really complicated. Now they just ruined their plans. And now my culture is suffering because of the turnaround time. Now,
Mhm.
if you want to make that graphic request, we'll do it. And we have very high standards for how quickly we deliver things, meaning we're going to go as fast as we possibly can. Now, there are going to be some clients that's not good enough for. They're not a fit for us. That's fine. But I do want to deliver them the freedom that they can ask for as much as they possibly need, and we will do our very best to deliver it. And those that understand and appreciate it, they're going to be great with that model. Now, the other side of it is how we vet talent is that they're fast and they're good. The second piece is that we are continuing to build, and we already have very good systems for efficiency on task lists.
Mhm.
So a good fast graphic designer can then come into an efficient task list and see their list of tasks and rip through them, right? Because their economies of scale there. And then the third thing is when we kick off an initiative, our first like 3 months, depending on the scope, are really in determining the brand. One of those pieces of the brand is the visual brand. So when we work really, really hard on getting clear on what that vibe is that people want first, very specifically with examples, so that when we get into mass production, we have things to pull from, but also we're not doing a ton of back and forth and iterating, which also saves time and efficiency on the machine.
Got it. Why did you decided to go wider than narrower and like more precise. For example, with Top Leads, I do cold email for SaaS and marketing agencies. You seem to offer copywriting, lead gen, websites. Why did you decide to go wider?
The vision I have, which I'm sure the product suite will change over time, right? We're really in that morph season. So as I learn really what the market values and whatever,
Sure.
I'm sure it'll evolve
Sure.
and get tighter.
Mm.
But really the vision I want to deliver, which the video on the homepage shows in a goofy way, is I want it to be a marketing department in a box. I want you to be able to outsource, your marketing team and scale it quickly and stay flexible with your costs, because that gives you value, but it's also better for the creatives. So what I am most excited about, like my sort of like subversive mission in the whole thing, is I want to serve the business leaders, but I also want to serve the creative community. And I want designers and video editors and website developers and copywriters. Most of them, if they're true creatives, they don't like clients. They don't like dealing with clients. They don't want to talk to clients. They don't want to sell clients. They hate sales. A lot of creatives hate sales. They're not, and I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush, but a lot of them are not great business people. They don't want to worry about finances. They want to worry about taxes. They don't want to worry about, payroll and invoices and all that stuff. So that's cool. Come into this creative world. We're going to continue to work hard to create this awesome remote creative culture. You get to set up at a coffee shop and design graphics all day, and your workload is secure and your payment is consistent, and you still get the flexibility of that life. So all that to say is, my vision is to deliver this kind of intermediary dashboard and asynchronous communication that allows business leaders to have that visibility in that marketing department in a box, while also protecting creatives from pain in the butt clients.
Yeah. What are your? I've been thinking about deploying VP sales, fractional VP sales service, but my thoughts on this specific service was that, okay, maybe I might commit too much of my time. I think I'll still be selling my time. I don't want to sell my time at this level, and the implication might be a bit bigger. In my case, I would recruit closers. I would recruit SDRs for some companies. And I found that this service, although kind of cool, it's kind of cool because you can get to know a company in a better way and get data out of it that you can use to propel your other businesses. I thought that it wouldn't be that much interesting from an economical perspective. What are your thoughts on fractional services, in your case, fractional CMO?
Yeah, really good, right? So as you scale up in price with Pathmaker, that's largely me determining how much time I need to spend.
Yeah.
When you're buying at the lower price points, you're buying the machine, right? You're buying the dashboard, you're buying access to the team, you can make requests, form submissions, whatever. I don't touch that, right? And that's a part of how we keep the costs low, right? Is you can come in and make requests, and it goes to Asana, and it goes to this or that, and the designer executes it and comes back. That's a machine, right? And there are cogs in the machine, and it runs with machine-like efficiency. Fractional CMO or VP of sales work, I think, can work, but the price point has to be right. And there has to be really, really good, clear expectations and boundaries set. Now, one of the biggest challenges with that, in my experience, is you can set the expectations all you want, but that client is going to have a really hard time not just seeing you as their full-time VP of sales.
Yeah.
So their expectations for your time and what that means are going to be very hard to clearly define. Yeah. I do think there's a world with the right client and the right scope and the right price point where you could have, and I'm planning on this, a very small set of clients that really see you as more of a full service member of their team, and the expectations and performance are aligned. I just think you have to price it right, and you have to be honest with yourself about how many of those you can take on, which is probably like 2, maybe 3.
Yeah, because I think it would be like a sub part-time role, probably, at least 10 hours per week at most, in my case, to make it real. And even in my case, it's just not appealing, but let's say 10 to 20 hours. And yeah, they would expect, for you to answer the messages quick, which is also a challenge. You'd probably need an assistant to take that. What I could possibly do is the HR side of things. So either pair them with a CMO I could call it fractional CMO. I take 50. The fractional CMO takes another 50%, and that could be a way. And there would be technology in the equation. There would be assistance and efficiency, so that they get the real CMO service, or VP sales in my case. I think that's the way I would go with it. But yeah, it's certainly an interesting topic, and it's kind of very niche. My dad, which is a marketing consultant, he did that gig for a couple of companies the past couple of years, and yeah, I guess he learned interesting stuff with that. Another thing that may suck if with fractional CMO types of jobs is that you get paired with a team, the existing team. The team is you're not kind of fully accepted. You will be their leader, so you might get into leadership problems, and also the quality of the staff. You don't have the full rights, to fire them and so forth. So you could hit these obstacles. But I want to kind of shift topics here, and well, a good way to shift topics would be talk about two books behind you. Personal curiosity. First, the Tim Cook one that I had on my list. It's Apple, one of the largest companies in the world, top 5 most probably, if I check the in stock valuations and total market valuation right now. But tell me about what you learned from the Tim Cook book, and his management style, and what he did since Steve passed away.
Yeah, it's an interesting book. It's not my favorite biographical book. It's you read like Phil Knight's Shoe Dog, for example. That's my favorite.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's so fun to read, and it's so illustrative. This one's more like it reads like a textbook. It's like, this is what happened, then this happened. Now, for whatever it's worth, what I was curious in, and I assume most are, is what does it look like as a leader to come in after this hyper creative genius, and then to propel the business forward. And I think it's a really powerful case study in the power of systems, efficiency, consistency, supply chain management. Right, it was a big part of what Tim Cook focused on, I think rightly. And then in the supply chain management, I think part of what was powerful about what he did was he not only focused on improving the supply chain, but he from a systematic perspective, but also from a experiential perspective for those key cogs in the supply chain. Because you look at these key elements in China and wherever else, a lot of those companies are largely dependent upon Apple, right, as a primary customer. And so they will do whatever they have to do to make Apple happy. And there was some crazy stuff happening at these like sweatshops, right, where they were delivering
Foxconn, iPhone. Right?
What's that?
Foxconn. Foxconn is like the big manufacturer, and people jumping from the windows. They have to put nets.
Yes. Well, first of all, okay, so that to me was one of the stories that stuck with me too. Is they had people committing suicide, and their answer was to put up more nets. Change your damn, environment. You provide counseling services. Give people antidepressants. Like, don't just put nets out. That's just like that's almost encouraging people to jump. It's just
that's kind of the weird Chinese culture. Like yesterday, I was watching this video of I'm not sure if you saw that one, but the man coming out of the car with like COVID, and them kind of holding on to his hands and kind of shielding with a mask, and spraying him with like this stuff, like it's like they first treat the problem in a very rational and cold way, and well, that's good like on the short term, but I think they should fix also the root problem of the root of the problem. And like when you think about that culture, like you said, making it a nice place to work and so forth, increasing the work conditions. But it's like the Chinese culture. I've been there, and sometimes it's very cold and systematic, and you can still feel the communist in the culture, the communist part in there.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with that. And that was something that I think, that was something I really learned from the Shoe Dog, Phil Knight book, was how he really explained the difference in the culture. Now that was Japan, obviously, which is different. But the takeaway is just the influence of a country's culture and how different they are in terms of business practices and how you work internationally, which I do a little bit, right? We have some members of our team that are in the States and some that aren't. And it's interesting. I feel like I've kind of just a little bit started to experience different cultures, and how they view work and those relationships. And it's powerful, something to pay attention to.
Second book behind you, Armada. So
Yes.
that's a cooler one. So tell us a bit about that one.
Ernest Cline, baby. Ready Player One, Ready Player Two. Yeah, I'm a cinephile. I
Same
think,
here.
and so I grew up. I was born in the 80s, but I grew up in the 90s, but I loved 80s movies. So
Same here.
all of those, Back to the Future, Star Wars, Starfighter, all that stuff. So I fell in love with Ernest Cline through Ready Player One, and then eventually Ready Player Two. And so then I was just looking for any excuse to read any of his books. And Armada, for those of you who are familiar with the book and the 80s, it's like a lot like The Last Starfighter, which was one of my favorite books growing up, and had some of that plus Ender's Game kind of in there. So yeah, I loved it. I loved Ernest. I love all of Ernest Cline's work. And then I also just recently read Project Hail Mary, which is the author who wrote The Martian. This is his most recent book. So I always try to. I don't do a good job of this pretty much most of the time, but my target on the board is having a good fiction book and a good nonfiction book I'm reading. Kind of balance it out. And I love sci-fi. That's like, I don't like any other kind of fiction to read.
Yeah, same here, sci-fi. So like, how would you describe yourself as a leader, and what habits have you acquired to make you successful in business in the last couple of years?
I will tell you the kind of leader I want to be. The kind of leader I want to be is a servant leader that is focused on my employees. And I look at that through two lenses. One is that I want to create an environment where there's clarity, where they know what their expectations are, and that I bring people around me that want to be held to a high standard, but done in love. And I know love seems like a really strong word, but I really do want that to be the target, that I create meaningful relationships with my employees, and that there's that balance, right? That 1-2 punch between affirmation and conflict. And I want both. I want to have people on the team that I'm affirming and telling them they did a great job when they did, and being very specific about those things, but then also confronting them, be like, hey, we really have to close this gap this week. I was just having a hard conversation with a member of our team I've been working with for a long time, and we dropped a ball this week, and we've been dropping this ball consistently. And I kind of called him onto the mat a little bit and just said, we cannot continue to drop this ball. Do you want to do this role, or do you want a different role? He said he wanted to. And I said, great, I believe in you. What do you need to succeed? Right. So it's kind of that 1-2 punch of I'm going to hold you to a high standard, but I'm also here to help you achieve that. And if you don't want to be held to a high standard, it's probably not going to be fun working with me, because I will not settle for subpar experiences. Now, I'm not expecting perfection, but I am expecting that we learn from our mistakes. I'm okay with making mistakes. I'm not okay with making the same mistakes. So I think that's one of the key elements of the cultures. It's not a should have culture. It is a next time culture. So really working hard to develop that. I forget the second part of your question.
Well, like, it's your philosophy is kind of a good father philosophy, I'd say. So it's like push for greatness, but with love, always with love and empathy. And I can feel that. I pictured myself as you were talking, if you were my leader, for example, and that's what I would feel. Just that most humans, I think, you need to find the precise ones that wants to be pushed, because lots of them, they want to settle for complacency and just working, just getting their pay, and going home after that, checking Netflix and having a nice weekend. I think most humans settles for that. How do you make sure you find these A+ players?
Well, the best advice I got was work together before you work together. So finding opportunities to work together on some kind of projects on a trial basis, I think is the most powerful way, right? You can interview people, and you should have interviews and good questions, but until you actually have an excuse to work together for some period of time on something, you're just not going to really know what that's like. So that's a big thing, right? Is having a hiring process that allows for opportunities for kind of scope work. working together before you work together, I think is, 30-day trials, 60-day trials, 90-day trials, whatever, I think are great. We scale up our pay. So generally speaking, we start hourly and then we go to contract and so on from there. So that helps us a lot with that. I think that's a key thing.
Very
and then
good.
being as clear as you possibly can on the front end. So I was just onboarding a new employee and I was just letting them know, like, hey, my expectation, because they were apologizing because they started at like 10:30 instead of 9 or something because they were working on some other personal project. And I told them, I was like, I don't care. I genuinely don't care when you work, but I do care that we hit our deadlines. So you don't have to apologize for starting at 10:30, but my standard and expectation is that we're going to deliver and the trains are going to run on time. So if I start to see that's not happening, I'm going to ask you about your work rhythms, but I trust you. So you're good, man. Already
the end of the podcast. In a couple of seconds, where can people find out more about you, Anthony?
Pathmakerbranding.com. My name's Anthony Domine. Find me on LinkedIn and let's connect.
All right. Thank you so much, Anthony. Have a good day.
You too, man.
Bye.